There's certain tools that I get a lot of questions about, and one that I've received more questions than almost any other is the Siegmund Fixture table system. I made a video about this when I first put it in the shop a year or so ago, but when I first get my hands on something, I don't have a lot of experience to speak to. I can just show some initial impressions. So I'm going to do an update on the fixture table here, and I'm also going to be adding another accessory or another tool to it that the folks at Quantum Machinery sent out to add to this kit. And this is a press. It's a hydraulic press that attaches to the fixture table to be able to push and form material and be able to turn this into a big hydraulic vise, basically, to press things together. So we'll take a good look at that here in a minute. So the particular table I have is a 3-foot by 4-foot System 16 table. That means it has 16 millimeter diameter holes as opposed to the heavier duty 28 millimeter diameter holes. And it's their imperial system, which means everything's measured out in inches. Now, it came with a fixturing package, and they still have this same kit available on their website today. I'll link it in the description below. It's not an affiliate link or anything, but if you are interested in what came with it, and I'll also put a link to the video that I made when I first got this, where I go over each of the pieces in detail. Let me show you some projects that I've done on the table over the past year. So this one is a welding cart. And just for rough layout, the grid lines on the table are really helpful. And then I can use a spacer to just create 2 parallels using some of those stops. That way I'm sure everything sits right. You can see how nice it is to have a fixture table to put everything together and keep it clamped down so it doesn't warp or distort when I weld it together. Now this is a top tier that's going to go on to the cart, and you can see how I have it all clamped down with 2 of those vertical brackets so nothing warps or distorts, because oftentimes that happens when you start to weld everything together. This turned out great. This is a simple table that I built for some machinery that I had, and you can see it's a simple rectangle there at the top. It's nice to have everything clamped down while I tack it and weld it together, but the unique thing I did here is use those vertical brackets once again mounted to the table to be able to hold the legs nice and square. Now since this was thin metal, just holding it in place was sufficient, but if it was heavier duty or I had a tighter dimension I needed to hold, I could go ahead and clamp to those brackets and clamp the whole thing to the table, and it would keep everything from pulling and warping around. Worked out really well in this case. These are some pieces that I'm fitting together to form a chute to catch chips under my chop saw. I built this and designed it 6 months or so ago, and I used those stops in place to be able to actually line everything up and get these to fit, because it'd be very difficult to hold them in place without something. And granted, if you had a plain steel table, you could tack weld them to the table or tack weld some dogs on, but this was a lot faster and easier, and the fit came out really good. Overall, that worked out great on that cart stand, and I built the cart in a similar way. This is a hydraulic press that I built for fabrication to press in dimple dies, and for this build I had a number of pieces that needed to go together, but I needed 2 very parallel reference surfaces to hold everything in place. Right there, once again, you can see those vertical brackets mounted to the table were just the ticket to be able to fixture this in place. I also designed it to interface with the table itself, so I can clamp the press and other things right down to the table, and I kept it clamped in place while I welded the feet on. That way I could be confident that it's going to fit when I want to attach it in the future and use that press. This is a go-kart frame for a vintage style cart that I built on the channel not long ago, and you can see how I'm using those extension brackets because it's a little bit longer than the table. And then I can use the grid lines, since I have everything squared to the table, to actually mark and notch and make the cuts in the frame and make sure everything's going to fit just right. Here with the front axle, you can see how I'm using the grid lines, and that's one thing that's really nice, having those grid lines to be able to line things up quickly and make sure that everything sits square. I'm using a couple of these angle brackets to align the steering column, and then a couple more to actually support the front wheels because it was longer than the table. That project turned out great as well. So could I have built these projects without a fancy fixture table system like this? Yeah, of course I could. I built a lot of projects before I ever had this, but It's way faster, more enjoyable, and the quality is just better of the product that comes out when you have a system like this. And the quality of the system itself is just top notch. I'm really happy with it and would highly recommend this system to anybody looking for a fixture table. Now let's take a look at this hydraulic press. I'd never seen a tool like this until I went to FabTech last year, and I was hanging out at the Quantum Machinery booth, and they had all their fixture tables. They're the distributor for these Siegmund tables, set up with a bunch of displays. When they reached out and asked if I'd like to make a video about one of these, I was pretty excited to get my hands on it. Now the concept is really simple. You can attach the press to the table just using these speed-tight bolts, and then there's a handle that threads in, and I can just pump this right here to apply a load. And if I want to use it more like a vise, I can take one of these brackets right here and attach it directly to the table as well. And then you can clamp anything right in here and just release it with the lever. There are a lot of other ways that you can use this though. As I was playing with it a few minutes ago, I thought it was really smart, some of the engineering that's gone into this. You know, it has this yoke at the front. It actually has detents with a spring plunger so that you can rotate it every 90 degrees. That way, if I need to get the handle out of the way for clearance of something, I can do that. Or I can even rotate it all the way over and lock the pin right down into the table. Maybe, there we go, just like that. And then I can press with it like that, and that lets me turn it to sit at different angles, something like that. So I wanted to test this out on a project. I can think of lots of times when I could have used it on previous projects, but I just put together a little one for testing out of some scrap material I had. This is some 1" by 1.5" rectangular tubing, and I'm lining it up like this in a shape of a cradle, and then that 1/4" thick flat bar will sit on top, and I'm going to use the press to bend that down into that center post. So start off by fixturing the regular pieces here and then go ahead and weld them all the way out. I've set up a couple of brackets to keep this thing from sliding around and clamped it in place, and now I'll just use the press to form this material down to shape. It's really pretty easy to bend this with this press, and I think it's not anywhere near the capacity of what you can do with this thing, but it's a fair example of the type of thing that you may want to do with it. So I can go ahead and tack this in place, and then after I do, I can remove that press, and it'll sit there just like I was hoping. So it'll be fun to see where I'm able to use this press on projects in the future and how it fits in with the whole table system. Thanks for tuning in and sticking with me through this video. I hope you enjoyed it or learned something here. If you did, let me know by hitting that thumbs up below. And if you do want to check out the Siegmund press or Siegmund table systems, Quantum Machinery is the place to do that. I'll put their website down in the description below as well. We'll see you next time.